Hello and welcome back to Gary's Garage, and in this episode we're going to be looking at getting the Chargecooler system all up and running. So last time we made the modifications necessary to the engine coolant radiator to get it fitting in its new place in preparation for fitting this Chargecooler radiator from a Subaru Legacy. And as well as that, we also need to figure out the plumbing, obviously to this radiator, to the pump, which lives down in that corner, and to the Chargecooler itself on the top of the engine. I was previously using 13mm hose for this, because I had these old PC water cooling fittings, and it was okay, but I think with some extra flow that I can get from a slightly larger hose, it will just help the cooling a bit. What I did find was that if I was just cruising along, it was almost at ambient temperature, but if I put my foot down on the throttle and generated a bit of heat, the whole temperature would kind of raise by a few degrees, and then the next time I did that it would raise by a few degrees again, and it would take a very long time for it to come back down closer to ambient. That's obviously not great. You want the air going into the engine as cool as possible, and that's why we fit intercoolers and charge coolers, etc. to turbocharged cars, because the air that comes in when it gets compressed by the turbo or the supercharger gets heated up as part of that compression, and we then need to cool it down again, and that's where we use these charge coolers and intercoolers. Now, I don't have space to fit an air-to-air intercooler across the front. That would probably have been the best option, but that would then mean trying to get 2.5-inch pipes from the turbos down to the intercooler and then back up to the throttle, and there's just no space. So I went with the air to water intercooling instead, also known as charge cooling. So what I'm going to need to do is try to figure out what fittings, hoses, etc. I need. Hopefully I've got what I need in stock from random old bits that I've bought and hacked apart, but otherwise I might need to place an order online to get some new bits delivered. So first off, let's have a hunt through my box of hoses, get out everything that looks like it's 16mm and see what I can piece together. First thing I'm going to do though is take off these 13mm fittings and adapters into the Chargecooler itself and replace them with some AN fittings. These are AN-10, complete with a -10 to 1/2-inch NPT adapter to go into this. So let's get this off and then we can start hooking up some 19mm hose, hopefully. So even though I've got a selection of various sizes and shapes of hose and also a length of brand new rubber hose, unfortunately I don't think that any of these are really going to do the trick. This hose is just a little bit too stiff to contort around some of the corners, and yeah, the angles aren't brilliant either. They don't quite go where I need them to go. There's also another complication. I want to add in a bit of a header tank just so there's a store of water and to allow a little bit of expansion when the water starts to warm up a fraction. And what I'm thinking is that down sort of in this triangular section that's made between the edge of the radiator and the inner arches, I want to put a triangular shaped reservoir over there. So I also need to figure out how I'm going to get the water out of the reservoir into the pump, then into the Chargecooler, then the radiator, then back to the reservoir, or maybe some other direction, but probably that way so that the water that's in the reservoir will just go straight down via gravity into the pump for priming and bleeding. So I think the first thing I'm going to need to do really is make up the tank to go in here in this very small space that I have, and then I can figure out where I'm going to put the fittings on that to take take the water out and feed it back in. Now I've got a couple of aluminium sort of like 1.5 litre expansion tanks, which are rectangular. So I think I'll use that as a basis and then hack it apart and make it fit in the gap I've got. So I think I'm going to need to get some cardboard out to design what's going to go in the space and actually fit first, and then make that in aluminium. Oh, hi, sorry to interrupt this time lapse, I'm sure you're enjoying it. Just wanted to say that I have set up a Patreon account, and if you're not familiar with Patreon, that allows you, the viewer, to support me, the creator, by pledging a small amount of money each month, and in return I'll do something back for you. At the moment I'll put your name in the end credits, and in the future there might be some other perks, maybe some merchandise. If I can get the videos edited quickly enough, maybe you'll be able to see the videos a day early. So details will be down in the description. If you want to check that out, it would be really appreciated. Thank you for your time, and back to the time lapse. There we go, that's sitting there quite nicely. Give me a reasonable volume of water as well, and take the outlet from the back here so they can go straight down into the pump. Right, a couple of hours later, and I've got something that is just tacked together in roughly the right shape, and that goes that way round and slots into there. So that sits nice and level with this front panel, and it will go round this cross member all nicely. That's what that cutout there is for. And then on the top here is where I'll put the fill and bleed. Not quite sure what I'm going to do with that yet, whether I'm going to use one of these radiator style, or whether I'm just going to go for a basic bolt or just a screw on cap. Not sure yet. I'll figure that out in a moment. But that is looking pretty good there. It's a nice tight fit. It makes full use of that space, which is what I wanted, most capacity for the space. So what I need to do now is go around and weld the whole thing up and get it nice and watertight. So after doing the cutting and folding, I then did some welding, which, I'm not too displeased about. My aluminium welding is starting to get a little bit better, and so far it appears to hold some water. So I salvaged the top off of the other expansion tank that I had. This did have a pressurised top on it, but I will probably just put a normal non-pressurised cap on it. This isn't going to be under a huge amount of heat and temperature. Hopefully it's not going to get over 100 degrees. So I shouldn't need the pressure relief from that. So let's see how it fits in the space and try to figure out what I'm going to do about plumbing it all up, because I haven't cut any other holes in it yet. So this will slot nicely into here. That sits quite nicely. There's a little bit of movement, which gives me options for mounting and wriggling it in. And then the crossbar goes across. About there. And then the radiator will come in around about here-ish. So we'll put water in the top here, and it will need to come out down the back to the pump, then probably up to the charge cooler. Then from the charge cooler it needs to come across to the radiator, and from the radiator back to the reservoir. Only route for this top hose is through this gap here, and well, there really isn't very much of a gap. So I think what I'm going to have to do is chop a bit out of this so that my pipe can go through there between the radiator and this. Oh, and it was going so well. I just completely forgot about that. Or the benefit of hindsight of thinking things through just a little bit more before you blunder forward and do things. So I'll take an inch or so out of that for the hose to go through. That will give me that route on a nice 90-degree angle there. So I guess I'm going to be chopping this up, even though I've only just made it. Chopping it up, giving me a gap through there, and I'll come back in a bit. Right, hot off the welder. And there we go, plenty of space through there for that hose to go. Okay, so I've just spent a few minutes just holding up the radiator and various things and trying to figure out what fittings I'm going to go for. So I'll go away and get some of those ordered, and then when they come I can continue modifying this. But what I need to do next is move over to this side, and I need something similar but not quite the same. It doesn't need to be quite as large capacity, but something similar on this side that will take the overflow from the coolant radiator. So this one is going to be getting up to temperature, this is going to be getting up to pressure, and this is a pressurized cap. So what will happen is normally this is totally full, and when the water expands and goes over the certain pressure, it will pop this valve inside here up slightly, which will then send the excess through this outlet, and I'll loop it round this way, and that will go then into an expansion tank which will be sort of half full of coolant. And the tube there will go all the way down and to the very bottom of that expansion bottle. As the engine cools down again, this is actually a two-way valve in this radiator cap, and as it cools down, the water contracts here, and it actually draws water back from the bottom of this expansion tank through the pipe and back into the radiator so that it's always full. Quite a common thing you'll find, especially on the VR4s that these came out of, is over time this radiator cap basically stops working properly. It will let the water out, but it won't suck it back in. So you come along and you top it up, and you go for a spirited drive, it gets warm, and the expansion bottle fills up, and then the radiator level drops. And then you go out for a drive again, and it warms up, expands, pushes a little bit more out. What you end up with is the top of your radiator is got no water in it. So simple fix for that if you do have that problem, is try replacing the radiator cap first with a brand new one, preferably genuine, and then give it a try. If that fixes it, brilliant. It's a 5, 6, £8 fix. And that's usually what it is, especially on the Galant VR4, definitely. So I'm going to employ the same principle, pressurised rad cap, expansion vessel over here. So I now need to modify my template and make one that fits in here. As I said, it doesn't need to be anywhere near as large capacity as this, but I'll use this one as a rough idea of something that look fairly similar over here. So I decided to just crack on, and I have made myself another tank. I decided to make it as close as possible to this one. Obviously there are a few differences. The radiator is actually about 5mm closer to this side than it is that side, so it just needed to be narrowed just a fraction. And there's the alternator behind here and the fan mount, so it all needed to take that into account. So it's just slightly different size and shape, but mostly the same. So that slots in there like that, and I've now got almost matching reservoirs on both sides. And I've also got a load of fittings, so what I need to do next is start to get all the pipework and fittings sorted out for the radiator and the charge cooler side, and I'll finish this one off at a later stage. There's still this bit here that I need to fill in and figure out how I'm going to put a cap on this, and I also need the pipe that comes from the top of the radiator here round to it, and that needs to go all the way down to the bottom and also have an overflow just in case it fills up. So that will come at a slightly later date. So let's get the fittings out and move back over to the charge cooler side and get that lot all piped up. Right, so rough plan of attack is that there'll be a fitting off the back bottom edge of this, which will go down to the pump. From there it will come up and through top to the charge cooler itself. Then from there it will run back through this gap that I had to put in the side of the reservoir here, round the corner and into the top of the radiator. Through the radiator and then out the bottom of the radiator through a 90-degree rubber hose into a 180-degree AN fitting into this fitting, which will be situated inside the reservoir like this. So this one has got a bit of a tube that comes up, that's about 60mm, and the aim of that is that that will then deposit the water out of here into the top half of this reservoir, and it will give me a good 6 centimetres of space at the bottom for the water to settle, any air bubbles that are in there to work their way out, so that I'm not sucking bubbly water or air-filled water into the pump. I've got another one of these which will probably come off the top of the radiator there into a 90-degree fitting to go around there. I've tried to keep everything as neat and close tolerances as possible. So that's the rough plan. So I will now crack on and try to get some of these things in position and all welded and cut up. So I've tacked on the outlet on the back and the inlet on the bottom here, and let's give it a quick test fit and see how it looks. I'm not sure how well this will come up on the camera, but with this here, this is going almost vertical, but it needs to lean back towards the radiator slightly, so it will follow the same angle. So what I think I need to do is just grind through the weld that I put on the back here, just lean it over ever so slightly so that I can get that kind of angle on this fitting, and then that should mean it lines up a bit nicer with the radiator. Okay, so just slice this off and moved it slightly, so let's see how this looks. Okay, that's a slightly better angle. It could still go a bit more though, there's still going to be space there. Okay, I shall slice it again and keep tweaking until it's all sorted. Sometimes it's a very iterative process. You have to do something, tack it, see if it works, move it, keep going until you get it. So that's the reservoir for the Chargecooler prepped with its AN fittings, and need to turn my attention next to the radiator. So what I'm going to do is take off these two inlets and outlets, take off the remnants of this mounting bracket, and then there's going to be it goes that way up as you look at it from the front. So this one's going to be an AN fitting, but one of those extended ones so that the 90 degree can go round the corner, nice tight to the edge of the radiator. And this bottom one is probably going to move up to the top of this end tank here, and that will then go through that 90 degree rubber into the fitting that I've just put on. So let's chop all this off and get those fittings welded on. Didn't go brilliantly cutting that bracket off. It has torn through the end plate there, but I was thinking that I might just put a whole plate around the whole thing anyway, just to give it a little bit of reinforcement, and especially as I want to be moving the outlet on one of these, it just thought makes sense to plate the whole thing, just give that extra, like double layer. So I'll definitely need to do that now, even if I wasn't planning on it before. So yep, it's looking a bit better. So I think what I'll do now is cut my plates out for this, get them welded on, and then I can just make this fully solid again, and then I can figure out exactly where I want the holes to go for the fittings and get those attached. So that's the end tanks on this now all welded up, and as they say, practice does indeed make you get better. I'm definitely getting slightly neater with the welding. I'm not contaminating the tungsten on the welder quite as often as I was at the beginning. And yeah, I'm getting pretty happy with how it's looking. Obviously still not professional level, and certainly still not particularly quick, but it's getting there. So that's all blocked up now. So I'm going to go and offer this up to the car and figure out where the two outlets need to go and what I'm going to do about the brackets. I will probably do the brackets first, because then I can get it in position and work out exactly where these need to go from there. But I need to obviously take the outlets into consideration while I'm making the brackets. So it's kind of both together, but one before the other. I just quickly made up a couple of brackets to go on the bottom of the Chargecooler radiator. So they will sit onto the rubber pegs that are already there. And they'll be attached to the bottom of the radiator, and that should support it up there, and plenty of room for me to just lift it out as well. So I'm going to tidy it, just clean off the paint on the bottom tank of the radiator, zap these on just very temporarily, just to hold the radiator roughly in a position, and then I can go get the flip front and see whether it fits and clears this radiator. Right, let's see what space we've got up here. Oh yes, plenty of room there, absolutely loads of room. And I can actually come down a bit as well. If I can come down by sort of 30 millimeters, then that will bring that Chargecooler right into the opening here, as it is sort of, the top half of it is hidden behind there. So yeah, I can bring that down as low as I want to also get these two mounts in. So yeah, plenty of clearance up here. Looking good. So I'll get the front back out again now. So the main consideration then is where this is going to go through here. Because obviously it needs to hook into this top tank here. and this is quite high up here. And I could put a bit of an angle on it, which will allow me to bring the radiator down. So that's a possibility. And of course the other thing is this one here. But again, with a small amount sliced off of that elbow, I could possibly bring that down by a little bit as well. Put that right at the top, and yeah, that'll give me a little bit of extra movement on there. So yeah, I think what I'm going to do is slice this back off, move it probably 25mm down, and then I don't mind that going at an ever so slight angle upwards. It will also help with bleeding air out. And yeah, we'll get this lowered and then all of these sorted out and tacked into place. So I think I've got the angle on this outlet just about perfect now. I can get this fitting on and off without having to move the radiator. So next thing to do will be to finish zapping all of this up and add brackets at the top, and also secure these tanks because they're just laying loose at the moment. But unfortunately I have run out of time, so that will have to wait until next time. And if you would like to support me on Patreon, it would be really appreciated. Links will be down in the description. So thank you very much for watching, and see you next time. Bye!